Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're diving into a powerful explainer about a massive shift happening right now in the tech world. We're talking about the move away from traditional drag-and-drop automation straight into the era of natural language agentic workflows. Seriously, if you spent any time building automations, what we're going through today is going to completely change how you approach your daily work.
All right, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. We'll cover the third wave of AI, compare the old way versus the new way, build a research agent, fix common issues, go over a debugging checklist, and finally, talk about why your foundational skills still matter.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the third wave of AI and the evolution of automation. It's wild how fast we've moved through these distinct phases of AI, right? I mean, think back to 2022. That was the first wave, conversational AI chatbots. Suddenly we could brainstorm and chat with AI, which was mind-blowing. But let's be honest, it was mostly talk. It wasn't actually doing the work for you. Then, around 2024, the second wave hit. People started bolting that AI brain into node-based platforms like NAN or Make. You could classify tickets, summarize docs, take real actions. A huge leap. But the bottleneck wasn't the AI anymore. It was how long it took you to manually wire all those nodes together. And that brings us to right now, the third wave, agentic workflows. You literally just use natural language to tell the system what you want, and the agent builds the flow for you.
Now, to put this shift into perspective, it's estimated that a staggering 50% of all enterprises are going to deploy these agentic systems by 2027. Why the massive rush? Well, it's because of the sheer unprecedented speed of implementation and the drastic reduction in engineering bottlenecks. We are talking about a fundamental shift in enterprise architecture, happening in just a few short years. Honestly, if you aren't learning how to build agentic workflows right now, you really risk being left behind.
And get this, the Agentic AI market, which was valued at around $5 billion pretty recently, is projected to absolutely skyrocket to nearly $200 billion by 2034. A third of all enterprise software is expected to have Agentic AI baked right in. So these aren't just wild pie-in-the-sky predictions. This proves, unequivocally, that this is the direction the entire industry is heading. It's where the money and the future of work is flowing.
Moving right along to Section 2, old way versus new way, rethinking implementation.
Think of this transition exactly like managing a highly talented developer. If you hired a rock star engineer, you wouldn't sit over their shoulder dictating every single line of code, right? No, you'd simply describe the problem, explain the outcome you want, and let them do their thing. That is the true essence of an agentic workflow. You describe the destination, the final product you want, and the system itself figures out the best route to get you there.
Let's really compare these two. In traditional platforms, your interface is this massive canvas of nodes. You're dragging, connecting, mapping variables, configuring API calls, and manually debugging every single error. Building something complex takes days. But with agentic workflows using tools like Claude Code, your interface is just plain English. You describe what you need, and the agent completely handles the logic implementation. It writes the code, connects to your tools, and even fixes its own errors. So what used to take a full day of manually wiring API endpoints can now be described and running in literally minutes. The agent takes on all the heavy lifting of the how, letting you focus entirely on the what.
All right, Section 3, building a research agent, featuring a trigger.dev walkthrough.
To truly grasp how this works, let's look at how seamlessly these 4 steps flow when an agent decides its own research strategy. Here's the setup. Step 1, you just type a company name into a ClickUp task. Step 2, a Polar agent detects this and wakes up your main company researcher agent. Now, Step 3 is where the magic really happens. In an old-school setup, you'd have to perfectly map out exactly how many times it should search Google, how to read every response. It's a headache. But here, the agent autonomously loops its web searches, reads URLs, and decides on its own if it has enough good data. When it finally decides it's finished, Step 4 kicks in, and it posts a beautifully structured competitive brief right back into your ClickUp task. And the craziest part? This natural language approach handles really complex logic, too. Like, if you were building a traditional automation to check YouTube for new videos, you'd have to manually build a database to check if a video was already processed, set up filters, handle deduplication, just so you don't summarize the same video twice. With an agentic workflow, you literally just tell the AI, hey, don't process the same video twice. That's it. The agent intelligently writes code that implements an item potency key, usually the video ID, to handle that deduplication automatically. No extra database nodes to drag, no manual filters. It's astonishingly efficient.
Which brings us to a really critical pivot point in this explainer. If I can just talk to my computer and have it build these massive automations in minutes, why isn't everyone doing this today? Well, what happens when this seemingly magical new workflow breaks? Because trust me, it absolutely does.
That takes us to Section 4, Fixing Common Agent Issues, the reality check.
The very first major issue you're going to hit is context drift. It's just like giving a human complex instructions for an hour straight without letting them take notes. Eventually, their focus slips. If you keep an agent running in a single, long session, it starts to forget what you told it at the very beginning. It might reference old code, revert to previous patterns, or just totally lose the plot. The fix here? Break your work down into much shorter, highly focused sessions and continuously update a project summary so the agent always knows exactly where things stand.
Next up, we have hallucinations. Think of the agent like a highly enthusiastic junior developer who didn't actually read the documentation. It acts a little too confident and simply invents things that don't exist. It might make up specific rules or hallucinate API endpoints that look perfectly clean in the code, but the second real data hits it, the whole thing shatters. These are really subtle errors. You cannot blindly take the agent's word for it. You absolutely must actively test the generated code in real time to catch these phantoms before they ever reach production.
You also have to specifically guard against scoping issues, namely over-engineering and under-engineering. Sometimes you'll ask an agent for a simple script and it hands you this massive, multi-layered architecture using complex frameworks you don't even need. Other times, it swings completely the other way, slapping a quick band-aid fix onto a bug instead of actually addressing the root scalability issue. To solve this, you just have to be incredibly specific upfront about your boundaries.
So how do we practically manage these issues? Let's check out Section 5, Testing and Debugging Checklist, Optimizing Performance.
Following this structured checklist is a lifesaver for preventing context drift and keeping the agent strictly within your defined boundaries. First, break your work into short bursts. Second, maintain those project summaries. Third, always use plan mode so the AI tells you what it's going to do before it writes a single line of code. Critically, run and test every single build. And finally, watch those interval polling loops. If your agent is checking an API for a generated image, make sure it's not aggressively polling every 2 seconds and burning through your rate limits. Have it step back and poll every 10 or 20 seconds instead.
You also need to remember that traditional software management remains completely mandatory here. Once your agentic workflow is in production, it's really just code running on a server. So you need error notifications to know if it breaks at 2 a.m. You need observability platforms like trigger.dev so you can visually see the steps the automation is taking. You still need version control to track your changes. And fascinatingly, you can even build custom QA sub-agents whose only job is to review the code your main agent writes. In fact, studies from firms like Anthropic show that these QA agents are catching subtle errors that human reviewers are totally missing.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, Why Foundations Still Matter, Your Ultimate Advantage.
If you spent the last few years mastering drag-and-drop platforms, I have some really great news for you. That time was absolutely not wasted. Platforms like NNZen aren't dead, they simply became the foundation. You can see it in these essential skills right here. You already understand workflow logic. You understand how data flows between APIs. You know how to handle errors, you can conceptualize triggers and actions, and you know how to prompt AI effectively. Beginners should absolutely still master these skills first, because this underlying knowledge is exactly what makes you capable of directing these highly advanced agentic systems.
So your job is no longer to wire APIs by hand. Your role has evolved. You are now the strategic manager. You're the architect. You provide the comprehensive plan. You set the structural guardrails, and your foundational knowledge allows you to spot exactly when the agent missteps in its implementation. You are orchestrating the AI rather than just acting as a human router cable.
As this massive industry shift accelerates and natural language completely redefines how we build, I want to leave you with this vital question to ponder on your own automation journey. Will you stick to manually wiring individual nodes, or will you leverage your foundation to orchestrate the next wave of autonomous agents? The destination is clear. It's entirely up to you to decide how you're going to get there. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, Focus Learners, and I'll catch you in the next one.